"Pretend to be my wife," the cold millionaire whispered while his mother watched from the wheelchair. "Hello everyone, please subscribe and turn on the bell to support our channel. It's free and helps us a lot. Where are you watching from? Tell us below. Now, let's get back to our story." The hallway of St. Augustine Private Hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as nurses passed with quiet urgency. Claire Bennett stood by the vending machine, her scrubs wrinkled, her eyes red from another sleepless night. She had just lost her job at the city clinic for standing up to a corrupt supervisor, and now she was visiting her younger brother who was fighting pneumonia. Her wallet held $20. Her pride held less. She pressed the button for black coffee, but the machine groaned and gave nothing. She sighed softly. Then a voice behind her, low, calm, and unexpectedly familiar, said, "Miss Bennett." She turned. Alexander Reed, CEO of Reed Global Industries, stood there in a tailored charcoal suit, sharp jawline, cold blue eyes, and an expression carved from restraint. He was the kind of man people lowered their voices around, the kind who never asked twice for anything. "Mr. Reed?" she stammered. She had met him only once, weeks ago, when she filled in for a nurse at his mother's ward. He had barely looked at her then. Now he looked directly at her, every inch of him pressed with purpose. "I need your help," he said quietly. Claire blinked, unsure she'd heard him right. "My help?" "Yes." His gaze flicked to the door at the end of the hallway, the one leading to the private suite where his mother, Margaret Reed, had been recovering after a stroke. "She's awake today," he continued, his voice low. "And she keeps asking about my wife." Claire frowned. "Your wife?" "I don't have one," Alexander said flatly. "But my mother doesn't know that. Her condition is fragile, and she believes I'm married. I need her calm, not stressed. I need someone she can see, someone kind, believable. You were the only one she remembered fondly from her stay here." Claire felt her heart hammer in her chest. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Just for today, just until she stabilizes." She shook her head, half laughing in disbelief. "Mr. Reed, that's insane." "I'll pay you," he said quickly, his tone more desperate than she'd ever imagined from a man like him. "More than you make in 6 months. Please. She's asking for you by name." Claire froze. Her brother's medical bills flashed through her mind, the eviction notice on her fridge, the quiet ache of hopelessness she'd been carrying. She swallowed hard. "Why me?" Alexander's expression softened for the briefest moment. "Because you were kind when no one else was." Behind the glass door, an orderly pushed Margaret Reed's wheelchair into view. The elderly woman's silver hair framed her pale face, her hands trembling slightly as she searched the hall. "Alex?" Her voice cracked through the air. Alexander turned to Claire, his usual composure breaking for the first time. "Please," he whispered, "just pretend to be my wife." For a heartbeat, Claire hesitated. Then something in his eyes, something that looked like fear, made her nod. He exhaled slowly, almost relieved. "Thank you." He straightened his tie, then reached for her hand. The warmth of his palm startled her. He guided her toward the door, the sound of his mother's voice echoing softly down the hall. As the door opened, the cold millionaire slipped his mask back on, squeezing her fingers gently. "Remember," he murmured under his breath, "you're Mrs. Reed." The room smelled faintly of roses and medicine. Margaret Reed looked up, her face lighting with joy. "Alex," she whispered, "and this must be your beautiful wife." Claire forced a trembling smile as Alexander wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his body tense but convincing. "Yes, mother," he said softly. "This is Claire." For the first time that day, his voice wasn't cold, it was almost human. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Reed mansion, the kind of place that looked more like a museum than a home. Marble floors gleamed beneath Claire's shoes as she followed Alexander down the long hallway, every step echoing softly. Her borrowed dress still smelled faintly of hospital soap. She had not slept much, replaying the moment when his mother smiled and called her my beautiful daughter-in-law. Claire had barely managed to breathe through the lie. Now, she was wondering what she had gotten herself into. Alexander walked ahead, crisp, controlled, silent. When they reached the study, he turned, his expression cool as ever. "You did well yesterday," he said simply. "My mother slept peacefully for the first time in months." Claire folded her arms, unsure whether to feel proud or manipulated. "So, what happens now?" "Now," he replied, "we make it believable." He moved to the large oak desk and pulled out a slim folder. Inside were documents, printed schedules, even photos of a fake honeymoon. "My mother might ask questions," he explained. "Where we met, our wedding date, what flowers you carried. She forgets details sometimes, but when she remembers everything." Claire stared at the pictures of herself photoshopped beside him on a beach she had never been to. "This feels wrong," she murmured. "Pretending like this." Alexander's jaw tightened. "It is wrong," he admitted, "but it is also necessary. She believes I am happy, that I have someone. Her heart can't take another shock." His tone softened just slightly. "You are not doing this for me, Miss Bennet. You are doing it for her." Claire met his gaze, and for the first time, she saw exhaustion behind his polished control. She sighed. "All right, Mr. Reed, but if we are doing this, we do it right. You cannot call me Miss Bennet in front of her." He hesitated, then nodded. "Claire, then." Her name sounded strange on his lips, gentler than she expected. Hours passed as they went over the story. They met at a charity event 2 years ago, married quietly on the Maine coast, lived partly in New York, partly in Los Angeles. Margaret adored the seaside, so every detail mattered. By afternoon, Claire's head spun with timelines and names, but something unexpected lingered beneath it all, the faint warmth in Alexander's eyes when she made him laugh unintentionally. It was rare, but real. Later that day, a housekeeper brought tea to the terrace where Margaret waited in her wheelchair. The old woman's smile brightened when she saw them. "You two," she said softly, "look perfect together." Claire blushed. Alexander bent down to adjust the blanket over his mother's knees. "We are, Mother," he said, and though the words were scripted, something in his tone wasn't. When Margaret dozed off, Claire whispered, "You really love her, don't you?" He straightened, eyes fixed on the horizon. "She's all I have left." Claire watched him for a moment, the cold millionaire, who suddenly looked nothing like the headlines described. Maybe this arrangement was not just a lie to protect his mother. Maybe in some quiet way, it was saving him too. As evening settled, the distant sound of waves from the estate's fountain filled the air. Alexander turned to her, voice low, steady. "Tomorrow she will want to see the wedding ring." Claire smiled faintly. "Then I hope you have one that fits." He glanced at her hand, and for the first time there was the ghost of a smile on his face. "I will." The following morning, rain tapped gently against the mansion windows, soft and rhythmic, filling the silence between them as Alexander poured coffee into 2 cups. Claire sat at the long dining table, feeling smaller than ever in the cavernous room. The silverware glimmered beneath the chandelier's glow, and she wondered if anyone had ever truly lived here, or if it had always been a museum for ghosts. "Cream or sugar?" Alexander asked without looking up. "Both," she said quietly. He passed her the cup, their fingers brushing briefly. For a moment, the air seemed to shift, but then he straightened his tie and returned to the familiar distance she had already learned to expect. "My mother wants to see us again this afternoon," he said, his tone calm, businesslike. "She asked about the wedding ring." Claire smiled faintly. "I remember." From his pocket, he drew out a small velvet box and placed it before her. Inside was a simple gold band, elegant and understated. "It belonged to my grandmother," he said. "She would want you to have it." Claire hesitated. "You could have bought something new." "It needed to look real," he replied. She slid the ring on. It fit perfectly. "Well," she whispered, trying to smile, "you have good instincts for fake marriages." His lips twitched, the closest thing to amusement she had seen from him. "It is not my first one," he said dryly. Then caught her expression and added quickly, That was a joke. She laughed despite herself, and for the first time since they met, his eyes softened. That afternoon they met Margaret in the garden. The air smelled of roses and rain, and the old woman's laughter warmed the gray sky. "Look at you two," she said fondly. "The ring suits her, Alex." Claire blushed, hiding her hand behind her teacup, but Alexander reached over, took her fingers gently, and kissed them as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Margaret clapped her hands. "Finally, my boy knows how to treat a lady." After the visit, when they walked back toward the house, Claire whispered, "You did not have to do that." "I know," he said softly, but she liked it. They reached the grand staircase, and Claire paused, looking at him. "How long do you plan to keep this going?" "Until she recovers enough," he said, his voice distant. "Or until she stops believing in fairy tales." Claire frowned. "And what about after that?" He hesitated, then looked away. "After that, you will get your payment and your freedom." His words stung more than she expected. Freedom. The way he said it made it sound like this arrangement was a prison for him, but somehow, she was the one feeling trapped. That night, Claire stayed awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, but her mind would not rest. She thought about his mother's fragile smile, about the way Alexander's hand lingered just a second too long when he pretended to kiss it. She told herself it was all part of the act, yet her heart refused to believe it. In another wing of the mansion, Alexander stood by the window of his study, holding a glass of whiskey he barely tasted. His reflection stared back at him, polished, cold, unrecognizable. He had spent years building walls so no one could ever reach him. But somehow this woman, this ordinary nurse with tired eyes and a stubborn heart, had walked right through the door he had locked from the inside. And that terrified him more than anything else. By the end of the week, the mansion no longer felt like a place Claire was visiting. It felt like a place she was haunting. Every morning began with the sound of the staff preparing breakfast. Every evening ended with the quiet echo of her footsteps fading down long marble halls. Yet somewhere between pretending and living, something inside her began to shift. One afternoon, Margaret asked to have tea in the sunroom. The light filtered through the glass ceiling, scattering across the garden beyond. Claire was arranging flowers when Alexander entered, sleeves rolled up, carrying a tray of fresh tea. He looked almost human in that moment, relaxed, even kind. Margaret smiled knowingly. "I love seeing you two together," she said. "You bring warmth back into this house." Claire's cheeks warmed. Alexander met her eyes briefly, a flicker of emotion passing between them before he looked away. When Margaret dozed off, Claire whispered, "You could have asked anyone else you know, someone from your world." Alexander leaned against the window frame, his gaze distant. "People from my world do not understand kindness without a price tag." She tilted her head, studying him. "And you think I do?" "I think you remind me of something I lost," he said quietly. The words hung in the air like a confession he regretted making. That evening, as the staff prepared dinner, Alexander surprised her again. "There is an event tomorrow," he said, setting a small box on the counter. Inside was an elegant navy dress. "It is a charity gala for the Reed Foundation. My mother insists we attend. She wants the world to see her son happy." Claire ran her fingers along the fabric. "You mean she wants to see the lie in lights?" He looked at her carefully. "If we are to lie, let us do it beautifully." The following night, the gala hall glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Cameras flashed, journalists whispered, and the name Reed echoed across the ballroom. Claire stood at Alexander's side, nerves racing beneath the calm smile she practiced in the car. When they entered, a reporter asked, "Mr. Reed, your wife looks stunning. How long have you two been married?" Without hesitation, Alexander turned to her, his hand resting lightly on her waist. "Almost 2 years," he said smoothly, "and somehow she still surprises me every day." Claire forced a smile for the cameras, but her heart was pounding for another reason entirely. As the night unfolded, she watched him from the corner of her eye, how easily he navigated a crowd, how the room seemed to bend toward him, how his laughter, rare and genuine, slipped out when she teased him about his dancing. When the music slowed, he extended a hand toward her. "Dance with me, Mrs. Reed." "You hate dancing," she said under her breath. "Tonight I make an exception." The lights dimmed, the orchestra swelled, and for the first time since the arrangement began, it did not feel like pretending. It felt like something fragile, unspoken, and real. As they moved together beneath the chandelier's glow, Claire forgot the deal, the money, the walls he had built. All she saw was the man behind the mask, the one who held her as though he had finally found something worth holding on to. When the song ended, he did not let go right away. "You did well tonight," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "You made everyone believe." She smiled faintly. "Including you?" He looked down at her, eyes unreadable. "Perhaps." The morning after the gala, the mansion felt strangely quiet. Claire woke later than usual, sunlight slipping through the curtains like gold ribbons across the bedspread. She was still replaying last night in her head, the music, the cameras, the way Alexander's hand had lingered at her back, steady and warm. It had all felt too real, too dangerous. Downstairs, she found him already at the table, a newspaper folded neatly beside his untouched breakfast. His expression was unreadable as he glanced up. "Good morning, Mrs. Reed," he said lightly, and though the words were the same as every other morning, something in his tone had changed. Claire poured herself coffee, pretending not to notice. "Did the foundation make enough headlines for you?" "It did," he said, setting the paper aside. "But there is one I did not expect." He turned the page toward her. A photo from the gala filled half the front cover, Alexander looking down at her mid-dance. Their faces close, his hand on her waist. The headline read, Asterisk, the cold millionaire. Finally melts. Asterisk, Claire's heart sank. "Oh no," she whispered. "Your board will think this is real." "That is the idea," he said dryly, though a small, reluctant smile touched his lips. "You were magnificent." Before she could reply, Margaret's laughter echoed from the hallway. "Look at my children," she said, rolling her wheelchair into the room, the paper clutched in her hands. "You two look so happy. You remind me of your father and me when we were young." Alexander's expression softened instantly. He walked to her side, kneeling to adjust her blanket. "Mother, you should not get too excited." "Nonsense," she said, reaching out to take Claire's hand. "This house finally feels alive again. I can hear it in his voice when he talks to you." Claire smiled faintly, her throat tight. Later, when Margaret went to rest, Alexander lingered by the window, staring out at the gardens. "She believes it completely now," he said quietly. Claire folded her arms. "And you? Do you believe it too?" He turned toward her, his eyes shadowed but gentle. "I am not sure what I believe anymore." The silence between them stretched, filled only by the ticking of the clock. Finally he spoke again. "There is something I want to show you." He led her outside to the back of the property, where rows of neglected greenhouses stood covered in dust. "My mother used to grow roses here," he said. "After my father passed, she stopped coming. Maybe you could help me bring them back." Claire looked at him, surprised. "You want me to garden with you?" "I want her to see something living again," he said softly. "I cannot do that alone." So they spent the afternoon cleaning the broken glass, cutting dead stems, and planting new life in the soil. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. Claire knelt beside him, dirt smudging her hands, laughter slipping from her lips when he tried to tie back a vine and failed miserably. "For a billionaire, you are terrible with your hands," she teased. He chuckled, shaking his head. "I build companies, not gardens. Maybe it is time you learned." When they finally stopped, Alexander looked at her, the faintest smile lingering on his face. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For reminding me that everything worth having needs care to grow." Her heartbeat stumbled. For a moment, neither of them moved. The mansion lights flickered on behind them, and the world felt softer somehow, like the night itself was holding its breath. But deep down, Claire knew peace never lasted long in houses built on secrets. Over the next few weeks, the mansion changed quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. Flowers began to bloom again in the greenhouse. Margaret's laughter returned to the hallways, and even the staff whispered about how different Mr. Reed seemed lately. Alexander had traded his usual silence for conversation, his sharpness for warmth. But for Claire, that transformation was the most dangerous thing of all. One evening, she stood by the greenhouse window, wiping her hands on her apron as Alexander walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You have dirt on your cheek," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. She laughed softly. "It is called hard work, Mr. Reed." "Then I am learning," he replied, handing her a cup. They sat together among the newly planted roses, the air thick with the scent of soil and spring. "Do you ever think about what happens after this?" she asked quietly. "After your mother recovers, after the contract ends." He stared into his cup, his voice low. "Every day. And I wish I did not." Claire looked up, startled. He met her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them, something neither of them was ready to name. But before she could respond, his phone buzzed. The moment shattered. He stood, his tone turning brisk again. "I have to take this." She watched him leave, that familiar distance returning like a shadow stretching at sunset. Later that night, she walked past his study and heard raised voices. The door was slightly ajar. A woman's voice, sharp, polished, echoed inside. "You are losing focus, Alex," she said. "Ever since that nurse came into your life, the board is starting to ask questions. They think she is manipulating you." Claire froze, realizing it was Victoria Hayes, Alexander's longtime associate, the woman everyone believed would someday become his wife. Alexander's reply was low but steady. "Claire is not like that. You do not know that," Victoria snapped. "You are risking everything for a woman you barely know." There was a pause, heavy with meaning. Then Alexander's voice, softer now, almost broken. "Maybe that is why it feels real." Claire stepped back quietly, her chest tight. She wanted to feel happy, but guilt knotted in her stomach. He was defending her against his own world, his own people, because of a lie she agreed to play along with. The next morning she avoided him, burying herself in tending to Margaret, who was stronger every day. "You have a gift, my dear," Margaret said, reaching for Claire's hand. "Since you came here, my son smiles again. Do not ever doubt the difference you have made." Claire smiled faintly, hiding the tears that threatened to fall. That night, she found Alexander in the garden, staring at the stars. "You should not let them talk to you like that," she said quietly. He turned to her, surprised. "You heard." "Enough," she admitted. "Enough to know you are risking more than you should." He sighed, the weight of a lifetime in that sound. "I have spent years living by rules that made me lonely. For once, I want to choose something that feels right. Even if it is built on a lie? Especially if it reminds me what truth feels like," he said. And the words left her breathless. They stood there in silence, surrounded by blooming roses, the distance between them smaller than ever. Somewhere inside the house, a clock chimed midnight, and for the first time, Claire realized she was no longer pretending not to him, not to herself, not to anyone. The next morning began with chaos. Claire was preparing Margaret's breakfast when she heard the sound of hurried footsteps and voices in the hallway. The housekeeper burst into the kitchen, breathless. "It is everywhere," she whispered, handing Claire a tablet. On the screen, the news headline blazed in bold letters. Asterisk Reed's marriage revealed as a contract insider speaks out. Asterisk beneath it was a photo of Claire at the gala, smiling beside Alexander, followed by a leaked document showing details of a supposed agreement. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. Someone had taken their secret and twisted it into something ugly. Before she could process it, Alexander stormed into the room, his expression unreadable, anger simmering beneath the surface. "Who did you talk to?" he demanded, his voice low and sharp. "What?" Claire gasped. "You think The board is calling an emergency meeting." He cut her off. "Victoria swears she had nothing to do with this, and the only other person who knew was me," she finished, her voice breaking. "You think I sold you out for money?" His jaw tightened. "I think I do not know you as well as I thought." The words hit harder than any shout could have. Claire felt the tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I should have known this would happen. You brought me here to play a part, and now that the script is ruined, you need someone to blame. You are twisting this, he said, stepping closer, his anger cracking into desperation. My mother, she saw the news. She fainted, Claire. She is in the hospital because of this. The room seemed to spin. No, she whispered, covering her mouth. Oh my God. Do not, he said, his voice trembling now. Do not pretend to care after what you have done. She flinched as if struck. Without another word, she pulled the ring from her finger and set it on the table between them. You wanted a wife to heal your mother, she said, her voice shaking. But you never wanted to believe in me. This was always fake, remember? So here is your proof. She turned and walked out before he could answer. That night, the mansion was silent. The staff moved like ghosts, whispering about lawsuits and headlines. Claire packed her bag in the guest room, her hands trembling as she folded the few clothes she had. She paused only once, looking at the small photo Margaret had given her, a picture of the three of them in the garden, smiling under the sunlight. She slipped it into her pocket and closed the suitcase. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady, soaking her as she walked down the long driveway toward the main road. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Alexander sat beside his mother's bed, guilt carving lines into his face. Margaret stirred weakly, her hand finding his. It was not her, she murmured. That girl loves you, Alex. Anyone can see that. He shook his head, his throat tight. I do not know anymore. Then find out, she whispered, her eyes fluttering closed again. Before it is too late. Hours later, back at the mansion, Alexander poured himself a drink he did not touch. When his phone buzzed, it was a message from his legal team. An anonymous source had sold the story to the press, and the name attached to the payment was not Claire's. It was Victoria's. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the floor. For the first time in years, Alexander Reed felt something close to panic. The woman he had accused was gone, and the one who betrayed him was still inside his world, and this time, he knew exactly who he had to make things right with. 2 days later, the rain had not stopped, and neither had the headlines. The world now believed that Claire Bennett was a con artist who had tricked a billionaire into a fake marriage. She had taken a room at a small inn on the edge of town, paying for it with the last of her savings. The walls smelled of old wood and coffee, and every time the phone rang at the front desk, her heart jumped, afraid it might be him. But Alexander did not call. He did not have to. His silence spoke louder than anything. She tried to distract herself with work at the nearby diner, serving coffee to strangers who recognized her from the tabloids. She pretended not to notice their stares, their whispers. When the bell above the door jingled that evening, she turned automatically, forcing a smile. The smile froze. Alexander Reed stood there, rain dripping from his coat, exhaustion carved into his features. Claire, he said softly. She gripped the counter, her voice shaking. If you are here to accuse me again, you can leave. No, he said quickly, stepping closer. I am here to apologize. She blinked, certain she misheard. What? You were right, he said, his voice raw. It was not you. Victoria sold the story. I have proof. He set a folder on the counter, the edges damp from the rain. She wanted the board to turn against me, to make me desperate enough to go back to her. Claire stared at the papers but did not touch them. And you believed her over me? He nodded, his eyes full of regret. I did, because it was easier to believe a lie than to trust something real. The words cracked something inside her that she had been holding together with sheer will. You hurt me, Alex, she whispered. You made me feel like I was nothing. I know, he said, his voice breaking. And I have spent every hour since trying to figure out how to make it right. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box, the same velvet one that once held the ring she had returned. You once said I had good instincts for fake marriages, he said quietly. I am hoping my instincts for real ones are better. Claire's breath caught. You are joking. Not this time. He opened the box. Inside was a new ring, not gold and polished like before, but silver, simple and real. The foundation dinner is tomorrow, he continued. The world will be watching. Let them see the truth this time. No contracts, no pretending. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. You do not need to fix your reputation with me. I am not trying to fix my reputation, he said, stepping closer until she could feel his warmth. I am trying to fix my heart. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, without a word, she reached for his hand, closing it gently over the ring box. You really think they will believe this? She asked, a faint, trembling smile forming on her lips. Let them believe what they want, he said softly. For once, let us live the truth for ourselves. The bell above the door rang again as another gust of wind swept through the diner, scattering napkins and carrying away the scent of rain. And for the first time in weeks, Claire felt something she had not felt since the day it all began: hope. Tomorrow, the world would see them again. But this time, it would not be a performance. It would be a beginning. The next evening, the Reed Foundation Hall glimmered beneath hundreds of golden lights, alive with the hum of conversation and the flash of cameras. This was the same place where it had all fallen apart, where headlines had been born and reputations destroyed. But tonight, something different filled the air: anticipation, maybe redemption. Alexander stood near the stage, his suit immaculate, his expression calm but unreadable. The board members whispered among themselves, waiting for him to address the scandal that had shaken his empire. Then, as the lights dimmed and the crowd hushed, he stepped up to the microphone. Good evening, he began, his voice steady. A few weeks ago, the world saw headlines about me, about a marriage that was supposedly fake, built on lies. For once, the headlines were half right. There was a lie, but it was not the one you think. The audience murmured, confused. He looked toward the back of the room where Claire stood in a soft ivory dress, uncertain but radiant. The lie, he continued, was believing I could live without something real. I asked someone to pretend to be my wife to comfort my ailing mother. But in pretending, I found something true, someone who reminded me that kindness still exists, that hearts can heal even after years of silence. The crowd turned as Claire began walking down the aisle toward him, each step slow, deliberate. Alexander's eyes never left her. When she reached the stage, he took her hand and lifted the microphone again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Claire Bennett, he said softly. The woman I once called my wife by contract. Tonight I call her my wife by choice. The room erupted in applause, flashes bursting from every corner, but for them, the world seemed to fall away. Claire's eyes shimmered with tears as Alexander dropped to one knee, holding the silver ring he had shown her the night before. No contracts, no pretending, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Just love, just us. The crowd quieted, waiting. Claire smiled through her tears. Yes, she said simply, and the word carried louder than any music. The applause was deafening. Margaret watched from her wheelchair near the front, her eyes bright with pride and relief. You see, she murmured to the woman beside her, real love always finds its way back home. After the ceremony, Alexander and Claire stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights glimmered across the river, reflecting in the water like 1,000 tiny promises. You know, she said softly, leaning against him, this time it really feels like forever. He smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. That is because it is. Somewhere nearby, a photographer called their names, asking for one last picture. Claire laughed, turning toward the camera just as Alexander laced his fingers through hers. The flash went off, freezing the moment forever. Not a scandal, not a contract, just two people who had learned that even broken things can bloom again. If this story touched you even just a little, hit like so the algorithm knows we still believe in kindness. Tap subscribe and the notification bell so you won't miss the next journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What moment of giving once changed you? Share it in the comments below. Your story might become the inspiration for the next video. And if you think someone needs to hear this story, please share it with them. Thank you for spending your time here. See you again in the next story.